welcome to MJ Hobby Corner. I'm Martin and I will be the host for you in this video. Now, we are in my winter quarters, my little winter studio where I hibernate for the cold months. The larger studio is closed for the winter until next spring. So this is a special video because it is a request. One of our friends of the channel had requested if I can go over the rules for the board game Descent. Now, I own the second edition of this board game, and I said, well, why not? So that's what this video will be about. We're going to go over all the rules, and this will probably be a couple of videos because I do want to show an example of solo play with this game and take it from there. So today we're going to go over activations. We're going to go over some of the components to the game. There's a lot of components, a lot of tokens, but we will identify some of those things and how movement works, how certain activations work, and yeah, so don't worry about the glare. That will disappear as soon as we get to the table behind me where all the components are spread out. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, so I have all the components set up roughly the way you would for two-player games, with the exception that the middle would have a nice setup of tiles depending on the quests that you were playing. The quests will identify all the tiles you need, deployment for the figures, all of that good stuff, and it's arranged in the center in a particular setup, in a particular way. We can go over quest setup in the next video, and we'll see how the quests actually have you set up the tiles. But for the time being, I'm going to leave the middle of the game area with all the tiles loose so that I can better explain the different tiles. We have the player setup down here, and we have the overlord setup over on the other side. Now, let's go first and foremost to the tiles. So here is a collection of tiles. Let's look at some of these. So a tile has these nice puzzle edges here, these puzzle tabs, and basically that allows you to put these together, and they go together quite nicely, as you can see, and really nice edges there. So that is basically in a quest. It's going to tell you which tiles will be used, and you will be attaching them like so. Now, a tile also has an identification number, which will be used by the quests to identify the number of tiles that you will be using. So this is tile 4A, but we also have tile 1A. And it is a number and a letter. So A series tile number 1 in A series, and tile number 4 in A series. Tiles are also double-sided. So you have a wilderness area depicted, and then you have some kind of interior area, be it a cave, be it, a dungeon. Most of them are dungeon tiles, but you also have the interior of, say, cabins, or things like that. The quest will tell you what the art depicts. Basically, it's going to identify the different areas for you. The next important thing in tiles is to understand these borders. Now, white borders mean that a figure can move throughout those areas without a problem, but then you have these special borders here. You have green, you have blue, you also have, if we turn this tile over, red, and you have yellow. Okay, well, starting with green, green tells you that there is a chasm here, a pit, which you can fall into. When we go over movement, we'll describe how these are used, but basically it tells you there's an open space here where a model can fall and take damage. The model will then have to climb out. Now, this particular tile also has a bridge, and if we notice, the bridge area has the white borders. There's green here, but these are white. That means that a model can cross the chasm through that bridge, okay? Every model has an entry point and an exit point. So going back to blue means water, and water is a terrain feature which will affect movement, and the quests may describe how that movement is affected. We'll go over it when we do movement. That's going to be a big thing coming next, okay? So, and then of course fire, you have dangerous spaces like fire or lava, and the yellow simply tells you if for whatever reason your figure lands on this tile, it's going to take damage, and there will be instructions in the quest. Now, monsters are affected by this as well, so that's important to note. The other kind of tile, all of these are double-sided. We said that already. The other kind of tile is the edge tile. Edge tiles usually have the symbol here. These can be used for deployment, and usually when a quest starts, it's going to give you the edge tile to use, and there's different kinds. They're also double-sided. It's going to tell you where the figures will deploy. Edge tiles may also be exit tiles, which will exit you out of the quest area. So there are ways in which that works, and we'll see that soon. Okay? And then we have what I call connecting tiles. These usually represent like corridors or in a dungeon, and they are there to basically add a connecting point to another tile. So they work like corridors in dungeons or even wilderness areas, a path, right? And so that's the other kind of tile you'll see. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Okay, so that covers tiles and the types of tiles, and that was a lot. I do apologize, but it'll help us understand later when we set up quests and stuff how that works. Now, let's go to the activation card and go through all the activations in order so we could see how movement works and how combat works. And that would probably end this video, and then we can go on. In the next video, we will continue anything we didn't go over on the card. Here is the player setup for the Elf Knight Sindriel. Right next to her is the setup for the Rune Master Leoric of the Book. So these are two heroic characters, and it is very possible for one player to actually control two heroes. Usually, when you have more than one player, you will have more than one heroic player. You will have each player controlling their own hero. So, when we look at Sindriel, we see the character card here. That is the main card. It has all of these stats of the hero, starting with movement, health, which is this little heart icon. She has 12 health. And then we have a fatigue mechanic in this game. So these are exhaustion counters. And then we have her defense stat. And the picture here is a picture of a little white die. Actually, a gray die, sorry. So it is, she uses the gray die for defense. We'll see in combat how that works. Now, these numbers here are different attribute numbers. Here we have the little gauntlet symbol with a fist. That is might. We have the open book. That is knowledge. And then we have awareness, which is the eye symbol there. Willpower, which is like this little light icon. So those are the different attribute stats, and attributes will be responding to special conditions that the hero gains during the game, either imposed by the overlord or imposed by the quest. So these are the numbers you will need to check. We'll go over attribute checks later on. Now, in addition, there is a heroic feat. It will give the instructions on how to use that feat. Some feats, in the case of Sindriel, do not need any action points to use. And we have a hero ability as well up on the top, which again instructs you how to use that ability. Now, in this case, if you have not moved during this turn, you recover 2 exhaustion markers at the end of your turn. So that is a cool ability to have. Now we will talk about the mechanic for exhaustion because it is very interesting, and this is the token, exhaustion token, that you use to record how much exhaustion a hero character has collected. And so in the case of Sindriel, she can collect up to 4 exhaustion markers before being completely exhausted and needing to rest. In addition to that, every hero has weapons. These are weapon cards that have the same symbol that the character card has up here. In this case, this is the warrior symbol. It is broken up into 2 classes. This is called the class card, and the 2 classes are Knight and Berserker for this particular deck. So they will have a couple of weapons that the model will start with, that the hero will start with. Okay, in this case, Sindriel has a blade, if it will focus. In this case, she has an iron longsword, and she has a wooden shield. Those are the 2 what cards that she begins with. Now, how do we know which cards a model begins with? Well, let's just quickly take a look at another class card that is not the basic card. These are called basic cards. They're the cards that your heroes will start the game with. The knight will start with 2 weapon cards. These are the only 2 weapon cards, basic weapon cards available for the knight. So Sindriel starts with those 2. But when we look at skills, she gets 1 skill when she begins the game. This is the basic skill. Now, if we look at a basic skill, that is the skill that the character starts with in the beginning of the game, we see the difference between these 2 is this little red number. This is an upgrade skill. This is a skill that Sindriel can learn in the future after a quest when she's ready to spend experience points, and this is the number of experience points needed to purchase that skill. And so when these skills have that little number, that will differentiate them from the starting skill, which is Oath of Honor. So she will begin the game with this. Now notice that there is an exhaustion cost to this spell. So, I'm sorry, to this skill. So when she uses this skill, she pays an action, which is that little arrow, and then exhausts the card, and she gains 1 exhaustion token to pay for that skill use. And now when you exhaust the card, that is, you turn it on its side, we know that she used that skill that turn. She can't use it again until the beginning of her next turn when we refresh cards. Now the player's side also has their activation card, which has all of the steps in a turn, very useful. It also has a character token icon, and here we have the matching token, and this is very useful to keep tracks of conditions and things that occur. Now this is very important. We're going to go through all of these particular steps, and then on the other side is the Overlord turn summary. Now one of the cool things is that when a hero has finished all of these steps, that hero turns over the card, and until we see the Overlord's turn summary. When the next hero completes all of their turns, they will also turn their activation card, and until we see the Overlord turn summary, and then the Overlord can take their turn. So it's a neat way of keeping track of the turns, and of course every hero has its own little icon, every hero class. So that's pretty cool. Okay, let us start the hero turn summary. So we're going to go through these steps. This is the most important part of the game. Now, I will probably only do movement. We'll stop at movement, and then in the next video, we will continue down all the rest of the steps. And I'm going to use Sindriel as my primary example, as she's right in front of me. So the first thing that we do is we look at the start of the turn. So Number one is start of turn abilities. So now during this beginning stage, any effects affecting the active hero, in this case Sindriel, that last quote until the start of your next turn will now end. So any of those abilities that started last turn that have that quote to them will suddenly end this turn. We are assuming that we've already played a previous turn. Also, any hero abilities that use abilities triggering at the start of the turn can also trigger now and will follow the instructions to whatever their effect. Then once the abilities, if any, are done and triggered, we now refresh cards. Refreshing, we look at our little play area here, and we see that Oath of Honor was used last turn by Sindriel. It is exhausted. And so now we can simply turn it, refresh it, and it is ready to be used this turn. Now, the cost that she paid in exhaustion, of course, remains on the card, but if she wants to use Oath of Honor again, she can simply exhaust it this turn and pay an additional exhaust cost, which then goes on her card. She can take up to a max of 4 this way. So we're going to refresh the card, and that ends the step 2 of start of the turn. Now we can equip items. So for equip items, what I do, here are my regular items. We're going to assume that Sindriel has played in another quest before this one, and she got gold. And during the at the end of the quest, when she is able to shop and use up her experience to get new skills, in the shop she actually purchased an item. I will talk a little bit more about these shop cards a little later on, but this is a card, an item that she purchased. She paid 100 gold for it. That's a lot. For purposes of this demonstration, we're going to assume that that's the case. So the card is, during the equipment stage, we can take this card and equip it. I usually put it under the hero's card here, just to remind us that the shield is equipped and so is the sword. And now her basic card is turned to the back to identify it as an unequipped card. Now a hero can only equip one armor item, which here's the little icon in the corner that tells you it's an armor item. One armor. A hero can also equip up to 2 other items. Here is this little ring, represents an other item. So it's something that the hero can wear on a finger, or something very small like that can be carried in addition to other equipment. Now, for our primary weapons here, we see the little gauntlets. And this tells us that this weapon, the blade, which is this card, can be operated with one hand. The shield can also be operated with one hand. Since heroes only have 2 hands, this makes sense. In the case of Arcane Bolt, we see that it needs 2 hands to operate. So let's say the hero, in this case the Rune Master, had a dagger or something equipped. It's going to have to unequip that dagger first, and in order to be able to use this spell, because it requires 2 hands. Many weapons can also be 2-handed. Okay, so we're now back to the basic equipment. The equipment that the character Sindriel, our elf knight, begins the game with. Okay, so we are done with phase 2, equip items. We can now go to 3, which is perform 2 actions. Every hero has 2 actions that they can perform. There are 9 different choices of actions, and they are all optional, of course. Now I'm going to go to movement, because it is the only action that can be interrupted by other actions such as attack. So let's go through movement. That will pretty much end this part of the series of this video. Sindrael can move, say, 1, 2, 3 spaces, attack the spider, and then move away 1 space. You can do that with movement. With movement, an archer can also fire. Let's say an archer can move 1, 2 spaces, fire their bow on the spider as long as they have line of sight, and then continue their movement after the attack. So movement is the only action that you can interrupt with other actions. Now, large monsters have a very curious rule. Since they have a large base, they occupy 4 spaces beneath them. So what you do with large monsters like this, the Overlord player, basically is choose 1 space beneath the monster's base, say this space down here, and then simply imagine that the creature occupies just that 1 space, that the creature is basically shrunk into that 1 space. And so then you can start counting. This creature moves 3 spaces, so 1, 2, 3, and then the monster must occupy that last space with the base. So the base must touch that last space. It's a very curious move, but it works well. And again, let's do that again. Let's say this time that the creature, we're going to choose this space for him. So we're pretending now that the creature has shrunk into that space, and we just say 1, 2, 3, and just make sure that the large base covers that end base that we just chose, and he can go in any direction. So the Overlord can choose whatever direction for the creature. Now, there will be situations when a hero model needs to move past another model. You cannot go past enemy models. You can go past friendly models so long as there is another empty space beyond that friendly model in order to land on. Now, in this case, obviously, we can't go through the black spaces here. However, we can go diagonal into this space, and so we can begin counting here. She moves a total of 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and so she can move over here if she wants to, avoiding the spider. Of course, that would not be very cool of Sindrael at all, but it can be done. You can move diagonally across things like this. Characters and monsters cannot move through these black edges of the tiles. The only places that they can move through to get to another tile is through these exit and entrance points. And a tile will have 2 or 3 or more, depending on the tile, of exits where models can enter and leave the tile. Now, in this case, the monster cannot go through these 2 heroes because they're blocking the path. And unless there was another tile here, let's say, where this is an exit, then the monster can move that way. However, because they're blocking the tile, the Overlord may decide to simply attack the hero models. Now, this hero, Sindrael, has come across some obstacle terrain. That's what the spaces with the red edges indicate. So this is an obstacle. Sindrael cannot go into that space, and she cannot move across the space because it is an obstacle, and they also block line of sight. So that is very important to note whenever spaces have the little red edges around them. It's a different kind of terrain. When a model encounters water terrain, that is terrain with the blue edges, they can move across the terrain, but it costs 2 points of movement in order to enter the terrain. Once exiting the terrain on the other side, in order to get to the land space, it only costs 1 point of movement. But so let's do that again. So Sindrael enters the water, that costs 2 movement. If Sindrael decides to keep moving along the stream, that costs another 2 movement. Now Sindrael wants to get on dry land, so that costs 1 movement. Now, models cannot enter a water space if they don't have enough movement points to satisfy the cost. So Cinderella only had one movement left because she had moved from another tile into this one. She only has one movement point left. She can't enter the water tile because it costs two. So she would have to wait to her next turn where she has more movement to be able to move across or within that water space. Large monsters move similarly, except we have to remember that we imagine a large creature such as this to occupy one space. We shrink them down. All right, so he could occupy either of these spaces over here. So let's choose this one, and then we count from there. Actually, we count in the space ahead of it. So this guy moves three spaces. So we count here, 1, 2, and 3. Now, there is water here. We can, if we want to end the movement there, we can. However, because monsters can, with large bases like that, can overlap water for free as long as their end space is still under their base. So in this case, legally, he can actually occupy that water base without spending any points the way a small model would. That's the interesting part of large creatures. Now, taking Cinderel's example, if she ends her movement, let's say, inside one of these lava terrain features, if she ends her movement there, she will immediately take 1 point of damage, and this is the token for damage. We'll talk more about damage during combat, but she'll take immediately 1 point of damage. She is removed from the board. That is termed being defeated. So once she is defeated, she's removed from the board, and we take one of her icons, which is, here's the hero icon for her, and place it in the nearest space that does not have lava on it. And the reason for that is that later Cinderella can actually stand up and get away from that terrain without taking more damage. So it is important to place the token that now represents her defeated away in the nearest space away from where she landed on the lava. It's important to note that large monsters can only be defeated by this kind of terrain if all the spaces underneath their base are that terrain. So the lava would need to be 4 complete spaces here in order for this guy to actually be defeated. If Cinderella, for whatever reason, falls into the pit or ends her movement in a pit, and the pit has the green lines that frame its sides, then she has fallen into the pit. She immediately takes 2 damage, and then the only other action that she can take is a special action called leaving the pit. An interesting thing about pits is that models can only have line of sight on a figure in a pit if they are adjacent to the space or figure that is in the pit. So only an adjacent model will have line of sight to a model in a pit. Likewise, a model in a pit, if they have a ranged weapon, will only have line of sight to a model that's adjacent to the pit. And again, with large models like this Eton, they only count as falling into a pit if 4 spaces are actually occupied by the pit. So in this case, an Eton model can end its movement with some of its space over the pit without actually falling in, because it doesn't occupy 4 spaces. There are some tiles with some very large pits where a large model can actually fall through. So heroes can also add extra movement points by paying a cost in fatigue. So how does that work? Well, Cindriel moves a base move of 4 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, say she wants to move 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She moves over here. She pays 1 exhaustion token for that extra movement point. Now, let's say she wants to move a total of 6 points. She will have to pay 2 exhaustion tokens for those extra 2 points. So anything above her base move of 4 will cost her an exhaustion token to move. Now remember, she can, according to her stats, she can only have up to 4 exhaustion tokens at a time on her card. If a character reaches their full exhaustion, they cannot do anything else. They will have to rest in order to recover some of those exhaustion tokens. So fatigue is a very important mechanic. Heroes can use it to use their skills, to trigger skills. They can also use it to gain extra movement. But what happens if a condition forces a hero to have more fatigue than its base cost? In the case of Cindriel, it's 4. So say she has 4 exhaustion markers on her card already and she suffers more. Whatever she suffers in excess is damage instead. So if she is forced to suffer 2 additional exhaust past her 4, that means she suffers 2 damage. Now, monsters do not use the fatigue mechanic. So any kind of fatigue that is suffered by a monster, a condition that causes it to suffer fatigue, it is done in damage instead. So that's a very important mechanic, is fatigue in this game. And I think that just about covers this video, what I'm going to cover for this video. I know it's a lot of information, but to be honest, folks, when you play the game, it's really not that difficult in terms of the mechanics. I mean, as we'll see in the next video, combat is very straightforward. We're going to look at the different dice, the different colors of the dice and what they mean, and how combat works. It's a very straightforward mechanic. And most of the abilities, all of these things are already printed on the cards. So all you have to do is just follow the cards. Like I said, for this video, I'm following the steps on the turn summary, okay? And then when we're done with that, we'll look at the Overlord's turn briefly. We'll look at, during combat, we are going to look at monsters and the monster cards and how they work. That'll be in the next video when we cover combat, all right? So I hope that you enjoyed this. This is our start of a series for the game Descent, and it'll be a mini series, and I'll cover all the different steps right up to solo play in this game, which is very, very interesting. So stay tuned if you're interested, and thank you so much for your support, and I hope that you have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.